picked a spot with a Ukrainian flag. I'm not actually in Ukraine at the moment, in Tallinn, the capital of Estonia. So today is November 6th. It is the afternoon, and Donald Trump has been elected the 47th President of the United States. And this channel is about geopolitics with respect to Ukraine. So I'm just going to briefly outline my reaction and what I think we have to watch out for going forward in the Russo-Ukrainian war. On the campaign trail, Donald Trump has been negative about continuing to support the U.S. support for Ukraine. So he's got a tuft of hair up here. And while his rival in the presidency, for the presidency, Kamala Harris, was more or less indicating that she would continue the Biden policy of supplying Ukraine with a certain amount of financial and military assistance so that Ukraine is not overrun by Russia, but it wasn't clear whether she planned to change that strategy and arm Ukraine to actually win this war militarily or not. There was a lot of hope on the pro-Ukrainian side that that's what a Harris presidency would have entailed, but it was by no means assured. Donald Trump, on the other hand, more or less keeps boasting about how he's good friends with Vladimir Putin, that he'll solve the war in a day, and that, indicating that he will not continue to support Ukraine militarily if Ukraine doesn't agree to some sort of cessation of violence with Russia and some agreement, presumably. More disconcerting, if you're pro-Ukrainian, is who Donald Trump has been surrounded by, in part, and who may figure in his new administration. Some of the figures would be Elon Musk, J.D. Vance's vice president, RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, many more, Vivek as well. And they have had a habit of repeating pro-Kremlin talking points with respect to the Ukrainian war and Ukrainian aid, and being very negative towards support for Ukraine, and they have figured quite significantly in his campaign. So that leads one to believe that this is not good news for Ukraine. And I would obviously, judging by my tone, agree with that. This is not what the kind of dull weather here reflects my my mood. It's not, at least it's not raining. It's not a complete inevitable disaster. So going forward, the first thing to see will be what Donald Trump will actually do. Will he promote people who have been reciting these pro-Kremlin talking points to positions of influence and power? Will he seek to cut off Ukrainian aid? Will he try to get Zelensky to agree a pretty calamitous, peace plan in inverted commas, really a surrender plan, from what I can see, with Russia? Does he have any leverage over Vladimir Putin? I'm not really sure about that. And we'll have to wait a couple of months to see exactly what all this entails. Also, while the U.S. will react in the next 2 months, how Ukraine will react. If Ukrainian aid is going to be cut off by the U.S., then the restrictions that the Biden administration has imposed in terms of how Ukraine can use those weapons, perhaps Ukraine is now going to disregard all those, and maybe the Biden administration will send more material and aid in the meantime. We just have to see how things pan out over the next 2 months, but it's definitely negative from the point of view of Ukraine, even though I've been pretty critical of the Biden administration's policy in 2023 and 2024. There was hope that a Harris presidency would mean a change of advisors and a change of policy by the U.S. to actually assist Ukraine to win the war, and that is very unlikely to be the case with Donald Trump. But let's see. Maybe he will change his mind once he's in power. But the omens are not good, and it's definitely not portents of optimism, but more pessimism with Donald Trump's election from the point of view of Ukraine. Some other implications are that European allies of Ukraine now have to step up more to the plate. I saw this morning that the Prime Minister of Luxembourg wrote that now is the time to create a European Union army These are all things I've advocated for, even over 20 years ago when I was studying international relations. And yeah, the prevailing opinion at the time was no, America will, protect Europe, obviously in exchange for a lot of benefits that America gets from that relationship, even if that's not how the potential Trump administration may view things. So we just have to see also what Ukraine's European allies decide to do. Just to conclude this very short live stream, just giving you my reaction. I did get a message from a pro-Trump supporter saying that, Connor, you'll be able to go back to Ukraine, there'll be peace now. And people will be flooding back. That's I know this is a strong pro-Kremlin talking point, or pro-Trump talking point on cutting off the aid for Ukraine. There seems to be a widespread misunderstanding of the difference between doing a business negotiation and doing a negotiation in international relations. If you do a business negotiation, then you know, and it doesn't work obviously perfectly in the real world in practice, but if you sign a contract and the other party breaks that contract, then in principle you can go to a court of law, get your rights enforced. If that person still doesn't execute or compensate you, then the state will intervene and take that person's assets, or take away that person's liberty. And it also doesn't obviously work out 100% of the time. I've even had instances like that myself. In general, that's why we have enough trust in that system working that we're willing to sign agreements. And also, you wouldn't be able to enforce an agreement if it was signed under duress. So someone can't break into your house, put a gun to your head and say, hey, sign a contract here to give over half your house. The courts are not going to enforce that. The state is not going to enforce that in principle. So we have this framework for when we negotiate business deals, which obviously Donald Trump is familiar with. In international relations, things do not work like this. Since the Second World War, we've had this system of international law, which has tried to introduce more stability and predictability and more rules to constrain how states behave, right? So it will say before World War II, basically, in general, we lived through an age of imperialism, pretty much, and that analogy I gave you about someone breaking into your house, putting a gun to your head and demanding you sign over half your house, well, that's how the world worked. Countries could do that, and you signing it, you knew that there was no real way to enforce it. They might come and take the other half of your house afterwards if they wanted to, or you weren't able to defend yourself because you weren't going to be able to go to a court. Who's going to enforce a judgment even if you could go to a court? Well, it doesn't work like that. It's based mainly on the amount of power you have and military power in order to enforce any agreement that you might sign. So that's why you'll see a lot of treaties are signed and states agreed to divide the world that way. And then suddenly, 10, 15 years later, they have another war and they're fighting over, and they're basically to renegotiate it. If they couldn't negotiate an agreement, then they went to war. There is a famous German military philosopher, Karl von Clausewitz, and he famously quipped that war is the continuation of politics by other means. And he was, I'm pretty sure, writing in the 19th century. Was it 18th century? It's 19th century, I'm pretty sure. So that was the way of the world. With the post-World War II order that has been led by the United States, in general, it has been harder to behave like that. It doesn't mean that it hasn't been possible at all, but in general, countries' sovereignty is respected, and you can't just invade another country and then annex its territory. It won't be recognized in principle, and that is what Russia is trying to overturn in this Russo-Ukrainian war. They are trying to overturn the ability of Ukraine to be an independent state. Ukraine basically wants to join the European Union for better economic prospects like they have here in Tallinn in Estonia. The economic development here is, the GDP per capita is probably, even if we take Ukraine before this invasion, 2.5 times, 3 times more, maybe 4 times more GDP per capita, because they were in the Soviet Union and they joined the European Union. They obviously joined NATO for protection from a revanchist Russia as well. So that's what Ukrainians want. Russia doesn't want that. Russia wants to re-expand its empire, first with Ukraine and then obviously continue on by taking the Baltics and possibly going all the way to Berlin if they can get away with it. The reason I say that is because before this invasion in 2022, Russia outlined a policy document, sent it to NATO saying, here's the new agreement, and basically meant that NATO had to leave most of Central Europe, all the Baltics, just leave them undefended. Why would Russia want to do that? Well, of course, to take back influence and control here. So in international relations, there's no court, there's no police, there's no global police. The US to a certain extent is seen like that, with limited capacity to enforce that we respect international agreements. Russia's already the person who's broken into your house and is occupying part of it and got a gun to your head, basically, right, in Ukraine. They're already breaking the law. And by Ukraine signing any sort of peace deal that Russia would agree to, because Russia wants to obviously control either directly through annexation or by proxy, by installing a government in Kyiv so that they control the country and then turn its attention to other parts of its former empire. The idea that you could enforce such an agreement over the long term is quite delusional once you've already set a precedent that, well, they're already acting illegally, but hey, they can keep whatever amount of territory they want from Ukraine. They can force Ukraine to have a small army, be undefended, stop them from joining NATO to protect that American protection. And Russia has a long history of breaking agreements that it signed. You just have to look to Chechnya. After the first Chechen war, they signed an agreement, they just broke it, and then a few years later and invaded and took back control of the region. So from Ukraine's point of view, signing an agreement is basically pointless. The only reason to sign an agreement, which definitely would not include signing over territory saying that it's Russian, is if they believed that they could rearm quicker than Russia will be able to arm, to then fight a later war. A good example of how this works was the Minsk agreements. Both sides signed them, but never implemented them, either side, because the reason to sign them is that Russia calculated that it would be able to undermine Ukraine in the meantime and not need to actually launch a military invasion in order to control the country. And Ukraine calculated that in the meantime it would be able to arm itself quick enough to defend itself from a further invasion. That was better than risking that Russia would have tried to take Kyiv militarily at the time. As I said, von Clausewitz's adage that war is a continuation of politics by their means. So they both thought that this agreement would work out in their favor. Ukraine calculated better. Russia was not able to control Ukraine politically afterwards, and the Ukrainian military was in a lot better position than it had in 2022 than it had been in 2014, 2015. So would Ukraine see that they can rearm quicker by signing for some sort of cessation of hostilities now? Not if the US is threatening to cut off its military support. That is the big fear, and therefore they would not think that it would be better to sign the agreement. Russia may also now not think that it's good for them to sign. They may think, well, the West is weak, the US is cutting off support, maybe we just go all in now and try to take everything now, rather than making the mistake that they made from their strategic mistake that they, from their point of view, that they made in 2014, 2015 by not going and trying to seize Ukraine and subjugate it militarily. They seem more open to that because they got a lot of problems in terms of voluntary soldiers, so men, primarily men in the military, but voluntarily signing up. They have now starting to see a shortfall in that, even though they're offering huge salaries. Materiel, so they're running through their Soviet era stockpiles very quickly, and they're expected to start to run out of a lot of equipment that they would need to sustain the current combat efforts sometime next year. They've already basically started to run out of the number of soldiers that they need to replace every month voluntarily, so they would either have to go to mobilization, or maybe North Korea is going to send hundreds of thousands of troops ultimately to help them, as we've seen some North Korean troops being sent to Ukraine pretty recently. And thirdly is the economic situation. Russia has more or less burned through its slush fund for this war. What they built up as a war chest over the last few years, $300 billion US dollars. I think another $300 billion is actually frozen in Western, US and mainly European Union banks and financial institutions, so they can't access that. And they are looking at very severe economic problems. Their economy is in a lot of trouble in the short, well, I wouldn't even say in the short term, but definitely in the medium term. For sure, it's in a lot of trouble. So would they still have the money next year to continue with this? There are restraints that they have, so it's not clear to me how they will calculate yet whether a cessation of hostilities is in their interest, or whether they will just go all in now and just think the West is weak. Trump has cut off the aid, and we should just go on all in now. So these are a few unknowns. There are my thoughts and reactions to Trump becoming, having won the election and soon will be inaugurated as the 47th president of the United States. At least we don't have to sit through days of wondering who's going to be the next president, which is what I had actually thought was more likely. But he actually won a clearer victory than anticipated. And from a Ukrainian point of view, or pro-Ukrainian point of view, it is not the preferred outcome in the election. At the same time, if Harris had turned out to actually have continued Joe Biden's policy, well, yes, it would be better than Trump trying to withdraw all the aid, but it still wouldn't have, provided a clear path to victory for Ukraine either. And that's a moot point now since she wasn't elected. We'll just have to deal with the reality of Donald Trump being president in 2 months' time. I did say in a live stream during December that when I think it was actually before December, it was in the spring, that if the aid that was been held up in the U.S. Congress and it was never passed at the time, that I still believe Ukraine would prevail. I still believe that they wouldn't sign any peace agreement, just that the war would be extended out by a long time and a lot of people would die and a lot of Ukraine would be destroyed. And with Trump becoming president, soon to become president again, we'll just have to see how things pan out. Interestingly, I'll leave this with a final point of this live stream. And obviously I started this channel pretty recently, so if you haven't written a comment and you're watching this replay, then you may comment down below. I can answer a question. I'm going to have another live stream on the main channel pretty soon. I'll leave with this kind of curious reaction by Peskov, the Kremlin's press secretary, I forget his official title, but basically the spokesman for the Kremlin. And he said that Vladimir Putin has not congratulated Donald Trump so far. On the other hand, Vladimir Zelensky has congratulated Trump on his victory, even before it was officially called by the media. And Peskov said that Vladimir Putin has no plans to congratulate Trump, and that Trump is the president of a country that's in direct and indirect military conflict with Russia. I'm paraphrasing a little bit because I actually also heard it in English. I didn't listen to it in Russian to see what he actually said himself in his native tongue. But that is interesting. So I think there's a lot less enthusiasm and champagne bottles been uncorked in Moscow than there was when Donald Trump won in 2016, for example. They seemed very joyful at the time. It seems to be a little bit more subdued, which is interesting. I'm not sure what to read into that. Are they less optimistic that in reality he will do all these things? Maybe they've got intel saying that actually that won't be the case. Well, if it turns out that Donald Trump is actually more pro-Ukrainian than Harris and Biden presumably would have been, then I'll be delighted, obviously in hindsight. But right now, that's not what I see the preponderance of evidence in the statements and who the people around Trump as indicating. Anyways, I'm going to leave this now here on a chilly and a little bit dull afternoon in Tallinn, Estonia. Probably sums up the mood. It's not catastrophic, but it is not as good as I would have been led to believe by a Harris victory had she won. At the end of the day, we just have to see how this pans out in the next few months. And I'll probably see some of you on the live stream on the main channel. I think I scheduled it for 5 o'clock so that it will be a little bit later US time, so more people can tune in for it. And that's it. Leave me a comment down below if you are interested in asking any questions about this part of my live stream as opposed to the one on the main channel. So bye bye, ciao ciao, do побачення from Tallinn.